All right, welcome everybody to another edition of Legaltech Week for October 23rd, 2020. This is the program in which we have a panel of legal tech journalists to talk about the top stories in legal tech and legal practice and legal innovation over the past week. I am Bob Ambrogi. I write the blog LawSites and have the podcast LawNext. And our panelists this week, as you see them before you, let's introduce ourselves. Molly, why don't you start?
I'm Molly McDonough. I'm a legal affairs journalist, a blogger at A Just Society, and a consultant based in the Chicago area.
And Zach.
Hey everybody, I'm Zach Warren. I'm editor-in-chief of ALM's Legal Tech News, coming to you live from a Minneapolis that saw 7 inches of snow earlier this week. Oh, fun times.
So bad. Joe.
Joe Patrice from Above the Law, and currently auditioning to be CNN's legal analyst because I hear there's an opening.
Nikki.
Okay, I am Nicole Black, the legal technology evangelist with MyCase. I write legal tech articles for Above the Law, ABA Journal, the Daily Record here in Rochester, and the MyCase blog, among other outlets. And just in case anyone's wondering, I am currently wearing pants. I don't know about the rest of you, but
This was going to be the all pantsless edition of the show in honor of a couple of celebrities in the news this week, but you'll just have to take our word for it as to whether we're wearing pants or not, because nobody is going to show below the belt on their camera this week. And Caroline.
Yeah, Caroline Hill, based in the UK, where pants means something quite different, guys, obviously.
Oh, it does.
Which has caused some excitement and confusion on our email exchanges.
I see.
Caroline Hill, editor-in-chief of Legal IT Insider, based in the UK, global audience, do a lot of webinars. And here, where I am, it's 8 o'clock, it's dark and it's horrible.
So what do you call pants?
Trousers.
Trousers, okay.
But we definitely don't call them pants. Pants is underwear. So yeah, when you're all talking in the email exchange about not wearing pants, my eyes were bulging.
This is why you want to tune into the show, because you learn important things like this.
I may or may not be wearing trousers.
Okay. Well, so it's actually been a pretty busy week this week and a bunch of stuff to talk about. But I did want to just take a moment to remember Gayle McCormick O'Connor, who died last Sunday, apparently in her sleep in her home in New Orleans. I suspect a lot of people on this in the audience and probably on this call had occasion to run into Gayle at some point or another, if not get to know her pretty well. She was somebody who'd been involved in the legal tech industry for a long time. I can't even remember when I first met her years ago, and really way too untimely of a death for somebody who was still in the prime of her life, and great loss to all of us. So I thought we could just do a moment of silence, which would, I don't know if you do that on a podcast, but let's all take a moment of silence to remember Gayle for a second. All right. And yeah, I did forget to mention that Victoria Hudgens is not going to be able to be here today, and Victor Lee, is also not going to be here. So Victor and Victoria are appropriately both off at the same time. So a lot to talk about today. I'm not quite exactly sure where to start. I mean, we could talk with the reason about the reason we're talking about no pants. We're debating whether the Toobin story is even a legal tech story. But heck, he's a legal analyst. He's a lawyer, and that was quite a tech screw up. I did not cover it. Joe, did you write about it at all? Why do I think you might have written about it?
Yeah,
he did.
We did
Tell
we
them your
did talk
headline.
about it. I think my headline was something like Jeffrey Toobin has a great point. Oh my God, his dick is out. No, like, yeah, it's.
And you had the greatest line ever in your article, I thought. I don't know why.
I can't remember what all.
Little Toobin escaped the corral.
Oh, the little Toobin, yes. Well, because when it first came out, I'm going to push back on the idea that it's a tech story, just because when it first came out, I thought it was a tech story. Because when I first came out, it seemed like it could well have been the idea that, he woke up early and, while not professional, he was taking the call wearing boxer shorts or something and, stood up and something happened. And, that's a tech story to me. It turns out that is not what happened. So this makes it a little less of a tech story and more of him affirmatively sexually harassing his coworkers story, which is very different. Though obviously tech is tangentially involved.
Yeah. Well, like I say, there may be an opening at CNN and the New Yorker right now for. No, I don't know what happens with all of that. It's really bizarre. I mean, this is not his first trip around the corral or whatever the expression is. He's had issues before, but.
I knew something was wrong a little bit more than just an accident when his immediate response was apologizing to his wife, which, an accident you wouldn't do. But he is no stranger to apologizing to his wife. So I think he knows when he has to do that. So, it wasn't good.
Yeah. Well, anybody want to offer insights or comments or?
I don't think you're going to get any takers on that.
I feel like the wisest course is just to, bite your tongue, right? Like,
yeah.
I have nothing intelligent to say about it.
Yeah. Well, maybe this is a good time to talk about my story, because it's a week of people in the news for odd reasons, I guess. And the story I wrote about this week was a story I started following back in 2016. But a guy named Derek Bluford, who's a really interesting character, but he had started a legal tech company back in 2016 called Quick Legal. He was kind of a darling of the legal tech world for a while. He had this up and coming startup. He was due to speak at Legaltech West Coast as a sort of a featured up and comer in the legal tech world back in 2016. He had done a couple of startup competitions with success. Claimed he was about to sell his company to like LegalZoom for tons and tons of money, and I came across the fact that he had just settled a lawsuit against him for fraud and impersonating a lawyer and stealing like $500,000 from people. And when I reported that, kind of things started to fall apart. It wasn't long before Quick Legal was out of business, and he was disinvited from speaking at the Legaltech West Coast, and various other things happened. But then he sort of started popping up in other ways. These other companies would get started that would have these strange relationships to him, like everybody who worked at Quick Legal was there except him, and it was all done by the same lawyer and everything else. It was a very weird story for quite a few years, and then he just kind of disappeared, and I didn't hear from him for a while. And then this week he published a book, a self-published book on Amazon, in which he claims that basically for the last 2 years he's been working as an informant for the FBI, in which he's been helping to bring down mayors of various municipalities across the country through another company that he had helped start that was called Text to Ticket originally, and I forget what the current name of it is, but it was an app for helping municipal police departments and municipalities enforce like traffic tickets and things like that. And he was apparently like trying to bribe various mayors and political officials around the country to get them to do a contract with this company, but supposedly all being done under the auspices of an FBI informant. So that story came out this week. It was like stranger than fiction. And then I just, after I wrote mine, I saw a post, a New Haven newspaper did a big story about following up on his efforts to, in fact, bribe the then mayor of New Haven, who, in fact, there was a documented dinner in which he went to dinner with the mayor, and the mayor left with an envelope full of $7,000 in cash, claiming she didn't know what was in the envelope, and she says she later gave it back to him. So
my favorite part about your story, my favorite part about your post, Bob, was her quote that said, "The mayor, I'm pretty sure we didn't break any laws." I'm like, well, that's reassuring. Like, this is your official quote.
Right. Yeah. Well, she might have said more than that. I might have picked and chosen a little bit, but yeah. And she said she's thinking of suing him. He's just it's unfortunately somebody you don't know what you can believe and what you can't believe in terms of what he says. The book could be a total work of fiction, or it could be entirely true, and I don't really know.
It's pitched as true facts, obviously.
Yeah, no, it's pitched as a true story. Yeah, no, he says this is what he's been doing for the last 2 years since. So he actually does. I do get a mention in the book as a legal blogger who reported on his lawsuit. And he also mentions in the book that when he called me and told me that he was about to sell out the company to LegalZoom or something, I checked with LegalZoom and they said, no way, we have nothing to do with this guy. And he mentions that in the book too. So
that's cool. I think my first impression, Bob, was this great journalism, to be honest with you. I mean, it's very cool. And I mean, we obviously not all of our stories have quite this much drama, and it's great that you were able to stop him potentially causing further damage. I think I commented on your post on Facebook just saying, wow, it's one of the more exciting stories that we get to post.
Right, well, that's the thing, we don't in Legaltech get these stories,
Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting when we're reporting on lawyers. At the Journal, we had a protocol for evaluating credibility of sources, including checking bar records and things like that. But when you're reporting on folks who are entrepreneurs and business folks who don't have that public paper trail, it can be harder to dig that information up until you find a court record, like you did.
But it's great. It proves. I think sometimes we were quite rushed, aren't we? And there's a bit of a slightly risk of death by press release. It just shows to me that what I took from it was the importance of doing real journalism and not just spilling out a whole bunch of the stuff that we're fed. There's kind of almost a responsibility, isn't there, to dig deeper actually and make the time to do that.
Yeah.
Well, and also I think it's great. Sorry, go ahead, Joe. I'll chime in after. Well, I was just going to say, I think it just isn't a attestation to what you do, Bob. And I've been at so many tech shows where people talk about how your blog, it's sort of the power of blogging, but also what you bring to blogging and your background and your insight and your skill, that your blog has become a hub for legal tech news. And the fact that you were willing to put the time into this and to get that information and to write about it and to do the research, it just shows what a wonderful job that you do. And it's, it really was quite impressive. I completely agree with that. It was really good investigative journalism and it made a difference.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah. All right, well, that's it for today's show. I think it's a good point.
I was just going to say, I mean, in all seriousness, though, way to go, Bob, for blowing his cover and ruining that probe they were doing on the legal tech industry. Like he'd been embedded for years and you had to destroy it all.
Yeah, he came out with the book, not me. I didn't put it on Amazon.
I mean, I like to think that we all, like do our research, and it's so, but this is, this is great. This is really sort of above and beyond. And I think it's great to see. Yeah, it's good to see.
Yeah. Well, I don't, and I think part of the trouble is as you say, Caroline, we're often rushed, but often, in a way, you often don't think. I mean, somebody comes to you and says, "Oh, I've got this great idea for a legal tech company, and I'm doing this and that." You kind of don't even think about, do they have a criminal background, or what is their background? I mean, you tend to take a lot of people just at their word and at face value. And I will say, to follow up on Molly's point, I've kind of gotten so that I do, if nothing else, I'll often just at least run them through Pacer or something to see if there's something going on. I mean, you can't check all the state court records as easily, but you at least want to know if there's any major litigation involving these people.
Well, that's what I was going to say too, is to a certain extent, yes, legal tech is big business, and yes, all of us here obviously cover it. A lot of people are interested in it, but it still kind of has an element of the Wild West to it, where a lot of people are just coming into this for the first time. They might not be the lawyers themselves. They might just be interested. So I know I've done maybe not Pacer, but I've done some LinkedIn searching, where exactly did this person come from? Randomly out of Nashville, and now they're interested in legal tech. How exactly did they get from A to B? And that's how, honestly, at least for me, some of the most interesting stories have come out, is just those random backgrounds that kind of tend to pop up in this industry.
Yeah. So I don't know. We got a lot of other stuff to talk about. Who wants to volunteer to talk about? Who's got something they want to talk about?
Talk about the Bakers thing. Oh, Molly,
yeah.
you.
Well, I can go first. I just really quick. Nicole Braddock and Theory and Principle held a bridge gathering between civic tech and justice tech on a platform Remo, and it was really fun. It was great. It basically requires you to be in a small group setting with your camera on. So you're, at that awkward table that you get seated at, whether you know people at or not. And then you could hop around and choose your tables. And it was really fun. I actually met some new people and connected with them later on LinkedIn and through email, and got a chance to catch up with some other former colleagues and friends. And then the programming was pretty good. They had a major connectivity issue with one of the speakers, but I really like the idea of bridging that civic justice tech divide. There's a lot of work going on in parallel, and kind of keep getting those people in the same room can be pretty valuable. So I'm hoping that Nicole does that again.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Do you have an avatar?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
Did you have an avatar?
No avatars. It was it was very much like TO in the setup, where you could, double click a table and then you could go move to that table. The room was set up the same way as that platform is, except the people are real. It's this screen with your background.
To Nikki's point, though, imagine an avatar could have saved Jeffrey Toobin's career. We would have had a totally different setup.
That sounds cool. I'm sorry I missed it. I really, because I think, it's great to pull together some of the better examples of online conferences. So I'm sorry I missed that, actually. I wonder if there's stuff that we can get. It won't be the same on, even if there's a replay.
Yeah. So I know a couple of people mentioned, Caroline, I think you were just mentioning the Baker McKenzie thing. Is that what you were talking about? And then,
so I think Zach
had raised it. Victoria had written about it. She's not here.
So Baker McKenzie entered into a partnership with a company called Spark Beyond, which is an AI innovation, or AI. Well, I didn't call it AI innovation company. I called it AI research engine, which is what it is. And it works with companies like McKenzie, with Thomson Reuters. And what it does is it effectively, someone described it as a data lake, and I've had so much mixed feedback. But anyway, so I spoke to Ben Orgrove, who's the head of R&D. Actually, this project is being run out of Baker's new innovation arm, which is called Reinvent, not to be mixed up with Reinvent Law, which confused me a little bit. But anyway, and so what they're doing is they are, so Spark Beyond, they they effectively they combine Baker's data from across all of the different systems. They don't do a huge, what often holds back, as we know, these big machine learning projects is trying to get the data into some sort of structured form. They don't do that. They kind of trawl all of their data, as well as they combine it with publicly available data. And then they start to try to predict. For example, if Baker's is advising a client in an M&A transaction, they might try to use it to, initially actually Baker's is using it for internal purposes, but then the objective is that they'll start to use it for clients. So for example, they've got a big M&A, they might trawl to say, right, well, these are the risks, these are perhaps the non-legal risks in this due diligence process. And there's all sorts of other sort of situations where they're thinking that for that they probably have to bake in the client. So I'm not explaining it. So there's different stages. There's 4 different stages. So they're going to use it internally. Then they're going to, if that works and they can get further investment, they're going to bring some more resources in, and then they're going to start trying to bake the client data in. So they've got an even bigger pool of data, and then they're going to start mining it to sort of predict, for example, as I just said, due diligence risks, that kind of thing, and sort of create this very sort of like side advisory machine learning led advice. And if that works, then they're going to look at how they can productize it. So for example, if they've got something that worked for not just 1, 2, 3 clients, but say 1,000 clients, or then they're going to look at how they productize that. And then they're going to look at stage 4, which Ben Allgrove said may not happen, is where they start to look at bringing that kind of knowledge to people's to where people are working, right? Which is sort of quite a big sort of ambition. I thought Ben Allgrove was very he was very sort of I felt very honest about, this is a big project, it's very different to anything that we've done. There were lots of comments after I read this piece, lots of comments on LinkedIn about, oh, this is what is this like, and this is putting tech before the problem and all this kind of stuff, and they to a certain extent they've got a point. But what's really cool is that I think it's really cool anyway, is that what they're going to be doing during the whole course of this project, and for me perhaps this is one of the most interesting things, is they're going to be using Spark's tech to look at how, starting off with one practice, how they work. And one of the reasons that you can't what's the word I'm looking for? That obviously with volume work, then you can start to create efficiencies, but with more complex legal work, because everyone does things in slightly different ways, it's quite hard to automate it. Automate is what I'm looking for. It's late. So what it's going to do is try to look at all the different ways that people are working and see. Obviously, it'll be slightly different, but say, right, well, this is how it's similar, and then try to, because it's such complex, to try to automate complex legal work is obviously a huge change, all sorts of reasons why it doesn't work, partly cultural, partly tech and everything. So it's going to try to help with that as well, trying to help to create sort of say, right, well, this we think is a common process for this piece of fairly complex legal work. What's interesting, I had lots of feedback. One is like, this is just like the press releases of 2017, it's just all about AI, it's nonsense. Yeah. And I can see why people might say that, but actually I think they're being very transparent about, and also Spark Beyond does this with some really cool companies, and it says that so far it has made $1 billion of difference to their bottom lines with companies like McKenzie, as I've already mentioned, and others, and there's corporates that they're working with. It's a really interesting project. I think they're being pretty honest about what they're doing. I like the fact that and Spark is a pretty cool company. So yeah, I don't know what anyone else thinks about that. I thought it was interesting. For sure, it's interesting.
Yeah, Zach, I know you guys wrote about it.
Yeah, we did. Victoria's the one who wrote about it, so she knows more than I do. But I definitely agree that it is interesting. There's a few different thoughts that I have about it, but the very first one is, especially in this first phase, we talk a lot about being able to predict with judicial analytics and litigation the outcomes. But this is a different type of prediction, where essentially it's kind of turned on the clients a little bit of, I'm trying to predict your risk and do it proactively, something that you're not even thinking about right now. So how exactly do I do that? What are even the data sets that I'm using to try and draw that out? Because kind of to your point, Caroline, it's so expansive. It's thinking about analytics in a little bit of a different way that I think legal has previously, which has been so litigation focused. Yeah. So I'll be curious kind of from that angle, A, whether it actually works, and B, just how much not only the lawyers themselves, but the clients in particular take to that, kind of the analytics being turned on them a little bit.
Yeah, because they're saying that where, we have a limited, because we've only got a human brain, we might foresee all of, say 2 things that could happen, but because, and it's quite clever, if you look at some of the examples of the work that it's done, I think one of the examples outside of legal was, it was talking about where you might want to launch a business, and we might have certain thoughts about where that might be as a business advisor, but it came up with, and I forget what type of business it was. It's right. You want to. The AI, the Spark Beyond system came up, right. You want to open next to a laundromat, right? Which people hadn't thought about, but because it is able to process so much more data, and perhaps it breaks it out of, we do things the way we do. We know what we know, kind of thing. And sometimes it's hard to show. So it's creating. It's giving you knowledge that you might have. So, for example, if out of 10 things that it comes up with, but Ben Orgrove was saying, hopefully there'll be a couple of things that they hadn't thought of, that sort of thing. And what's quite cool is it's a non-legal tech vendor, so they're doing something with someone from completely outside of the sector. It's horizontal, so and it's not very specifically use case based. So they are thinking quite laterally. And I think I'd be really, I mean, I think they're honest. They're like, we'll see where we get to. And I think that, it'd be really fun. We will see where they get to. But I tell you one other fun thing. So what's on the subject of Bob saying about, doing proper journalism, and then, there's other things that I'm now following up with them in terms of what's happened with other projects that they're working on, because obviously it sort of, then you start to think, well, what's happening with that they're doing, So that's something that I'm going to be following up with them.
That follow-up is another thing that can fall by the wayside when you get all wrapped up in keeping up with everything that's new. Sometimes you forget, well, last year they said they were going to do X, Y, and Z, and whatever happened to that?
And that's where, exactly.
Yeah. I like the headline on the law.com one on Victoria's story, which was Baker McKenzie's new AI project, knowing what clients want before they do.
I had fun with that one.
I'm going to post my story now, which doesn't have quite such a cool story.
I posted your I put the URL in the chat.
Mine doesn't have that cool story, the cool headline. I'm going to go back and change it.
It's a great story. Just didn't have. I just like the headline because it kind of it that catches you right there. I mean,
it really does. It's good.
So, all right, Nikki, how about you? What's up with you this week?
Well, there were 2 things that caught my eye. The first was more of a legal tech industry thing. You'd written about it. Case Text rolled out this ability to use context, which was what they'd rolled out. I believe it was at Legal Week. It was Legal Week, and it's this brief, this capability to create these motions using AI, and they rolled it out so that you can do that within Word. And I sort of just wanted to call that out because every time I read about something that Case Text has done, it's one of those things that makes you go, like, I'm showing my age here, pulling on like 1980s rap, but it's one of they always make me go, like, that's really interesting. They do things, they see things and do things in a different way. And I just sort of wanted to call that out because they always do. I'm always very impressed with what they're doing. So
I think that's a good thing to call out. I mean, they do think out of the box in terms of legal research, and they come up with really clever and useful and practical ways of doing things in legal research. I mean, when they first told me they were doing this, I kind of was remembering back to like Lexis for Microsoft Office or something, which was kind of a big deal at the time when you could just search Lexis from within a Word document. But this really takes it to a whole other dimension, and I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I'm just trying. I put your other article into there. Case Text is in there now. The other thing that I thought was really interesting was it was an article from a blog post from the Technology and Marketing Law blog about how someone sued, and I'm putting it in the chat right now, how somebody sued Facebook for a murder that occurred. And essentially the estate of the person who was killed by a stranger. The stranger stopped and shot some random person on the street, and the defendant in a lawsuit, the person who killed the plaintiff, killed the man whose estate sued, had posted some rant on Facebook prior to doing so that sort of implied that he was going to go out and murder somebody. But this was just a random stranger that he picked off the street. So he didn't identify who he was going to murder. I don't think he didn't know who he was going to murder when he posted that. And the court granted Facebook's motion to dismiss because for any number of reasons, that it was the post itself was vague, that there was no way of identifying who he was going to kill because he didn't even know who he was going to kill at the time, that this allegation that Facebook's algorithm should have picked up on this threat, and then who would they have called and what would they have actually done if they were going to try to stop this guy? Like, it was just, it wasn't this sort of foreseeable end result. But and that just caught my eye because it's so interesting to me having, my co-author, Carolyn Alapon, and I wrote Social Media for Lawyers, and that was published in 2010 by the ABA. And I've been writing about social media, screaming about it from the rooftop since, probably 2007. First it was blogging, and then it was Facebook and Twitter, and trying to get people to understand that this is going to impact you. And it's just been so interesting to me to watch over the years as it just becomes this inevitable, it's such a part of our lives and it shows up everywhere. Initially it was being used as evidence in cases, and that's when lawyers started to really take notice. And now it just infiltrates everything. And especially now that we're all remote, even more stuff is happening online than it happened before because it's the only way people can interact. So it just was so interesting to me to see that, the estate of someone who was killed tried to pull Facebook into it and sue them and allege that they could have somehow prevented this. And I think that in 2006 and 7, when I started writing about blogging and social media, I don't think anyone in a million years would have predicted we would have gotten to this point. And I just thought that was a really interesting case for that reason as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I assume if somebody was more explicit about their intentions in terms of what they plan to carry out, or even addressed to a specific individual, that the outcome would have been different here.
I mean, possibly. Oftentimes, and anecdotally, oftentimes what I've noticed is that when you do, it's other Facebook users will report some sort of post, and then that triggers things. But in this case, they were just trying to claim that the algorithm should have picked up on this threatening language and somehow triggered someone in a short enough amount of time to try and get the authorities to do something about it. But I think when there are more specific threats, you can come up with a more tangible claim that because it's more foreseeable, especially if they were notified by other users, I would argue. Maybe as their AI gets more sophisticated, maybe that can start to become an issue. But then again, there's like surveillance issues and privacy issues in some way. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
There's no shortage of rants and manifestos. So at some point, what the first step is, it violates the community standards or the use rules, and then does Facebook have an obligation to report that? That's a different question, but I don't know that was resolved with this because of so much of this was vague.
Yeah. Don't worry, they're going to get rid of Section 230 here in a minute, and then all of a sudden, it's definitely their responsibility.
Right. All right. Zach, did you have another story you wanted to bring up, or were you the Baker?
Baker was the main one, but also just found it very interesting how I believe it was Harvard Law is already saying that probably they're going to be remote in the spring as well. Edwin Chemerinsky out in UC said the same thing. So it's just one of those things where the next generation of lawyers are kind of caught up in what everybody else is. And it's interesting to me whether that does people a disservice, being remote literally an entire year of a 3-year law program, what it looks like for the future of law, and are they actually getting the instruction that they should, but just with everything going remotely? I don't really have any answers, but it's just something that interests me and I like to think about.
Yeah. And what did California say this week? That they're going to grant like temporary licensing of lawyers without a bar exam or something like that? Anybody see that?
Yeah,
did I make that up?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know the specifics of each of these. This is a popular way in which some of these bars are going about it. I personally think it's the most useless way that you can try and help any of these people, because I don't know about you, but like when I got out, I went to work for a firm and I had somebody supervising me, and I got to do all the things they're ever going to let a first year do anyway. And I didn't need anything temporary. This temporary license is just like saying, oh, do the thing that you were already legally allowed to do in the, with a boss. Right. And most of these things say you have to have a supervisor anyway, which was already it just frustrates me to no end.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
I had a crazy week, Bob.
Yeah.
I won't talk about it too long because I know I waffled on about makers. So there are two stories I know which interest you most, but there's a new fund that was launched by Kerry Birch, who used to be the CEO of Thomson Reuters Elite. And then the UK firm Travis Smith, they've launched this open source contract labeling tool, which my title was Travis Smith launches open source contract labeling tool and why legal AI vendors will probably hate it. And then I had a bunch of people phoning up going, I don't hate it. But I don't know which one of those sounds most interesting to you or which one you prefer if you want me to talk about either.
Well, whatever you find more interesting.
So the fund, the fund. Well, actually, I love both of them.
Well, the fund is actually interesting because that might fit with some other stories. But.
The fund. So Kerry Birch was at Elite. He's launched it with Eric Backlund, who was the CEO of AFI, and a bunch of other people. So Eric's son is involved on the board. It's 100 million to start with, but they've got big ambitions, and they're going to be funding. They're calling it operators for operators. So. What that means is that whereas with a lot of investment funds, it's not people who potentially have been in that same situation as the people they're investing in, but a lot of the people involved have been in the same situation. So they're advising on RegTech, cyber and Legaltech, and helping them in the capacity of an advisor is Gabriela Esturas, who founded eBilling Hub and iTimekeep. And she separately, but actually it's now being incorporated as part of the company's called Bryce Catalyst, and she's launching an incubator for female founders, which obviously the number of female founders is still ridiculously low, and the number who get funding is ridiculously low. So there's a big sort of diversity theme running through this, which is really, really cool. And yeah, they're sort of they're going to work with really early startups, so pre-VC, pre-private equity, and really help them. They said, they really understand how hard it is to run a business and to really sort of get it off the ground and things. And so they'll be obviously taking a cut, but they're going to be providing things like if you need a CFO, they can help with that, and if you need just whatever operational stuff you need help with, they can provide that. So it'd be pretty interesting. So it's another fund on the block.
Yeah. Part of the reason that I thought that was interesting is this is also a week in which I don't know if any of you saw the post on Medium from this guy Ted Wang of Cowboy Ventures. I think that's the name of the company. He's a venture capitalist. He's a lawyer, former practicing lawyer, who put this post up on Medium, basically describing his vision for the perfect kind of contract management company, which is a hot topic in legal tech, and saying in his post on Medium, we would love to fund a company that is building technology aligned with the vision outlined in this post. If you are interested, please reach out to me. I mean, how many emails did he get? I don't know. And then in the same week, there was the article on law.com. Zach, I don't know if this was Dan Packel wrote about this ex-Kirkland chair creates this SPAC looking to raise $200 million for a legal tech acquisition. The SPAC means a special purpose acquisition company or something like that, where they're just trying to raise. They just want to get into legal tech and they just want to acquire a company, and that's what they're going to do. all of this, I just speaks to how hot this field is right now.
I think what was great. I think there's been a couple of examples that I probably shouldn't name recently where you fear that because it's hot that you're going to get a bunch of people buying up and rolling up companies, and you think, it is legal is not this precious. I know we've kind of realized now that legal is not so different in many ways to other sectors, but actually there are things which work and which don't work, and I do feel like people with knowledge of the sector, if in an investment capacity, it would be helpful in terms of how you develop it and how you treat customers and clients and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of going back to Caroline's story, though, what really interested me is just the diversity of people that they have working on that one, because Thomson Reuters and iTimekeep, they're very integrated into the practice management of it all. But AFI, this ex-CEO of that, is kind of coming at it more from the AI side and the tech side. So getting a little bit more of the standard law with the tech and marrying the two, I think could have some very interesting results of people that are very forward-looking in this.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? What else we have? One other one I thought that was kind of interesting, Joe. You brought it up in an email today on the redaction story.
Yeah.
Which I was actually I noticed that myself, and you said you're not sure it's a legal tech story, but it sure seems like one to me.
It definitely it seems legal techy. It definitely seems legal journalism-y. We actually, the reason I mentioned it was we recorded Thinking Like a Lawyer, the podcast that we do internal to Above the Law. We recorded it yesterday, and this came up in that, and we riffed on it for a while. And I was like, oh, maybe that would be a good thing to bring over here. So for those of you out there, especially given our audience has a lot of folks who deal in press relations for companies. So, when you're dealing with things, sometimes things get redacted. And this is letting you in on some trade secrets here. But when something is redacted, the way in which journalists deal with it is we select all and then copy it and then paste it into another document. And most of the time, people don't actually have redactions on it. They have put little tags over things that make it not appear. But once you copy and paste it, everything shows up. So we can read the whole redacted document. It's a lot of fun. Thankfully, it seems as though in a rare move, some people involved in the Ghislaine Maxwell case, which is tangential to the, not tangential, deeply embroiled in the Jeffrey Epstein case. They understand that you can do that. So they did their job. They did not, as an e-discovery matter, redact it such that you could copy and paste it. What they didn't really think through was that they didn't get rid of the index. So you'd have an index, which if you depositions have everything, you'd have an index where like the word would be derp, and then the word after that would be destitute, and in between was just a blacked out word with like 55 mentions, right there alphabetically where Dershowitz would be, which allowed everybody to go through and backwards create based on the index where Dershowitz was in every place of the deposition. And Slate actually was the first people I saw who did it. They announced fairly quickly, within like an hour or so of it being out, that we have the fully unredacted version, and explained in glorious bragging detail how they figured it out based on the index. So don't do that, people. That's an e-discovery practice pointer. You should get CLE credit for this.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's really interesting. It's a whole other angle. As you say, usually the story is the copy and paste one, and it's surprising to me how many lawyers don't even know about that trick. But the journalists all know about it, and that's all that matters. I had fun with that last year with the Jones Day story when they put out the filed the document with the botched redactions, and they blamed the journalist for the error rather than fessing up to the fact that they screwed it up. Sorry, Molly. Okay.
No, I was just going to say that there are so many ways that redaction can go wrong, and I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I've downloaded a document and things that were supposed to be redacted were just there. So yeah, lots of issues. And if you're used to looking at government filings and know what the sequence is, you can also guess, especially if you're a reporter and you've been covering these, and there's an error, then you can easily kind of go back and fill in what was meant to be redacted.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the worst ones was they had one where sometimes a word comes up in different formats, right? The word Alan can be with Dershowitz. Not that I'm picking him particularly to tie to this scandal that he is obviously tied to, but just reminding people that he is deeply involved in this scandal. Anyway, but the word Alan is in there, but it's also one of the lawyers in the case. Their office is on like Allen Drive. And so those depositions, the index doesn't care the context. So it has like the blacked out word Allen and then all these sites, one of which takes you to an unredacted blah, 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 Allen Drive, which meant that they could look and go, well, that is obviously Allen then. And that means all these others are too. It's unbelievable how just boneheaded this decision was to not redo or completely not have the index.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
They also got Prince Andrew. Hey, they got a reference to Prince Andrew in the.
Oh, that's true. I'm sorry. I should have put him in here. In honor of the cross pond.
Yeah. Anybody have any insights or thoughts on the antitrust suit against Google filed this week?
I mean, I'd forgotten that we had an antitrust law in this country, so I was super excited to hear that. It's been like 20 years since one of any consequences happened, so that was interesting. I don't have a ton of insight into it, but I have been talking with some folks about antitrust, so like trying to get a sense of like what this means. And most people were, they feel as though what's going on is it's unfortunate that this is clearly a retaliatory measure, that the Department of Justice is just mad that Google isn't nice to Donald Trump and therefore they're doing this. But they feel like it's one of those, it's sad that that's the reason, because this is the sort of thing that's a long time coming.
Yeah, what kind of stood out to me, too, is obviously it was the Donald Trump DOJ. I think it was 11 Republican AGs that joined. But here in Minnesota, I know that Keith Ellison put out a statement that said, yeah, that's interesting. We're looking into this, too. So I think it may be a little bit more bipartisan than some people initially gave it credit for.
Yeah. For some reason, this came up when I was getting a haircut yesterday in the barbershop. Yes, I went to a barbershop and lived, and people were saying, "Well, isn't Google just better? Isn't that why? Isn't that why it has so much market share?" There's something to that.
Alta Vista.
No, Alta Vista. Well, yeah, I mean, DuckDuckGo, unfortunately, just doesn't quite do it.
It feels a bit like going back to the point we talked about with the court cases, where the tech cases come up before the judges, and everyone goes, "Oh." It feels a little bit like with these monopolies that these tech companies have, that we're in uncharted territory, right? It feels like, and everyone's going, "Okay, let's do this," but actually, it's pretty ineffective, and they're really not dealing with the monopoly. And it's incredible because we've had all of these long-standing competition laws. When you do M&A, you prevent these monopolies arising, but it seems like there's not really an awful lot of control, as we know.
Yep.
Well, the thing that I think is so interesting about these tech companies is, it's one thing to be like, oh, they have an oil monopoly. Like that's such a discrete concept. Whereas what Google does is not, it touches so many different things, it's search, but it's also, data mining and identity, and all the marketing. And there's just so much that they do and that they have their fingers in, so to speak, that it's hard to even identify what they have a monopoly on. They've got a monopoly on a lot of different things. And so
one of the dumbest things they did was become Alphabet and say, we literally have a million things that we control. Yeah, no, but In a lot of ways, it's reminiscent of the Microsoft situation, just now in kind of a cloud world. Like when Microsoft got dinged for forcing you to use their web browser with their computer, basically, right? Like it was a little more complex, but that's generically what it was. Now you don't really have that situation, but like they're selling Chromebooks that only have Chrome, and like Chrome and the search engine work together. Like so much of what they do, it doesn't involve a physical box the way that it used to with Microsoft, but that doesn't change what the Sherman Antitrust Act should think about it, right?
Right.
I'm just going to plug one of my favorite books on this topic, The Big Nine by Amy Webb. If you want to get a really great background on the development and the implicit and bias in the development of AI and the anti-competitiveness that's evolved with these large tech titans, it's a really, really good primer, and it's a fun, also scary read.
Was it just sitting on your desk? You just it's like had it there.
It's just sitting on my desk.
Just happened to have it. Yeah. Okay. Actually, something else I meant to mention, which I thought was kind of interesting, was when we finished our show last week at 4:00 Eastern time on a Friday afternoon, LawNext announced that it had raised $2.5 million in funding. Interesting story. I mean, this is the guy who originally founded MyCase way back when, and then sold it, and then started this CRM platform. Matt Spiegel, but it just seemed like very strange timing to me, and I've been like scratching my head about why did they announce it on a Friday? Usually you announce things on a Friday afternoon when you don't want anybody to know about them, and I couldn't figure that out. But that was an interesting story, and yet another. That's another area. The whole area of CRM that almost didn't exist, 5 years ago for legal, except for really big firms. There was nothing much for the smaller firm market. And then suddenly that's taken off in a big way. Anything else? Anybody else want to raise? Carol, I know we haven't gotten to all of your busy week, but all right. Good. All right. Well, thanks to everybody. And we will be back again next Friday, same time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
See y'all then.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a nice weekend.
Have a good weekend.
Too.